Yay.
Okay.
Looks like it'll work this time.
Yeah. Let me just make sure everything is good here with the audio.
Sounds okay to me.
Okay. It's good. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Better late than never.
No worries. Some Torah is better than no Torah.
That's right.
You got Facebook?
Yeah. Just got to do that Facebook and we'll get started. Okay. Looks like we're up to Daled. Okay. So, Okay, so I'll read this. I'm not sure exactly where it starts, but anyway, it says, Taman bedavar hanital shenatan saviv akdera. He insulated with something that can be moved, so it's not muktzah. And he put it around the pot. Davar shenital, also something which is not muktzah, the Shabbat. V'kisa gam alea davar nintal yachol. He also covered it with something which is also not muktzah. Yachol litol davar shenital b'Shabbat v'kisa gam alea. So that stuff he can take, he can move. So he can take the pot and return it, right? Yachol litol akdera ve'lachzera. Afilu taman bedavar she'eno nital im kisa bedavar nital. Even if he insulated with something which is muktzah, but he covered it with something which is not muktzah, notla machzira, I can still take it and put it back. Because since he covered it with something which is not muktzah, megaleh kisui, what you do is just open up the lid, the ochez b'ktera, and you can grab the pot, just take it out. Okay, so I'll go step by step. I'll stop there. Let's go to Bet Yosef. So it says here, Bet Yosef, B'rayta Hashem b'sof perek, right? It's in the B'rayta in the end of this perek, Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. Taman v'kisa b'davar hanital b'Shabbat. If he, insulated and covered with something which is not muktzah, it can be moved. Or taman b'davar she'eno nital. Or let's say he insulated with something which is not moved, but he covered it with something which can be moved. So either way, he can remove it and put it back. Return it. Okay. Then it says taman b'chisa b'davar she'eno nital. But what about if he used everything which is muktzah, cannot be moved? So then what do you do? Or he insulated with something which can be moved, but covered with something which cannot be moved. So if it was slightly revealed, he says, you can, in other words, you can get your hands in there without having to move anything. So you can take it and put it back. If not so, you're not allowed to do it. Okay. Rashi explains the kisa hainu kisui she'al piha. So it says, when we say he covered, that's talking about on top of the lid. But when we say that he insulated, we're talking about what he put around it. So if he covered with something which is not muktzah, even though he insulated with something which is muktzah, since the top can be removed, so we can reveal the pot and eat it. But if it's covered with something which cannot is muktzah, then mitzat pia megule, and it's not revealed at all, so there's no way to get in there. Even though he insulated with something which is not muktzah, he cannot take it. Why? Because he doesn't have where to grab it. He doesn't have a place to grab it. If you're going to tell me, if he insulated with something which can be moved, so why doesn't he just clear out, right, whatever is around it, and then tilt it to its side, and then the lid will fall off. Like we learned over there in Perek Notel, Kuf Ben Bet Amud Bet, Even She'al Pi Achavid, right? There's a stone on top of the lid of the pot, Mate Al Tzida. So what he does, he tilts it on the side, and he just falls off. How Kimna Haptam, but he says we qualified over there, Beshochiach, we're talking about where he forgot it. But the maniach naaseh basis b'davar asur. If he placed it on purpose, right? So then it becomes a base, right, for something which is forbidden. But if part of it is open, revealed, and it's not called carrying. Shemitzado, which is on the side, the kisui nofel me'elav, and the lid will fall by itself, fall off. The Tosfot kikshu alav. So Tosfot asks on Rashi, the Katvu, and they wrote the nir'eh that it seems the Rabbeinu Tam, according to Rabbeinu Tam, it seems to Rabbeinu Tam, the lo chashiv kemaniach me'achar shedato litlo b'Shabbat. It's not considered to be something that he placed since he wants to take it off on Shabbat. So here we're talking about a lid, which is like clay, which they place on top of the pot, and the pot is like insulated inside there, buried in there. So therefore, it's not possible to shake up to move the cover, the lid, unless he lifts it up a little bit. Okay, so this is the Bet Yosef. Okay, so let's go and see the Shulchan Aruch. I think this one is not as complicated as it seems. It's actually pretty straightforward. We're going to see in the Shulchan Aruch, right? It's not really so complicated at all. So it says in the Shulchan Aruch, Taman b'davar sheno nital, right? Let's say he insulated with something which cannot be moved, right? It's muktzah. But he covered it with something which can be moved. It's not muktzah. So how do you do it, right? What's the plan? So what you do is megalea kisui, you reveal, right? Open up the lid. Why? Because that stuff can be moved. The stuff which is covering the lid. And then, right, once you do that, you just hold the pot, and remove it. That's it, right? Becomes very, very straightforward to do that. On the other hand, though, right, if it's covered with something which is muktzah, if there's no access to the pot, there's no way to get in there to remove the pot. This is the problem, to open the lid, whatever. There's no way to do it. So therefore, he's got a problem. There's no way for him to get it out. We don't really have these problems today, but in theory, right? This is this is what we're talking about. So the only way he could do it, if he covered it with something which is muktzah, if it was a little bit open, right, revealed. So what he could do is, and grab it there, and tilt it until all the stuff comes off, right, and then he could access it. He would be able to access it like that. He could even remove it like that. So there you go, right? That's the way to do it, But the problem is, if it's totally covered, and all the top is something which is muktzah, so there's really no way, to access it. This is the problem. Let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says here. So Mishnah Berurah here says something very important. He says, "Ve'im taman bedavar hanital bekisa pia bedavar." If he insulated with something, right, which is able to access, it's movable, it's not muktzah, but he covered with something which is muktzah. So then there is a way to get it out, right? What you do is you clear out the sides, until the pot is revealed, and then you have a way to tilt it like that, and remove the top indirectly, and then you will be able to access it. So he says, right, that it doesn't become a base, so that's why you can do it. So if you can ask me, why doesn't it become a base? That we already explained last week, right? Because we said, if you remember, right, which one is serving which, right? It doesn't become a base in this case. So therefore, right, the insulation is serving the pot, right, and not the other way around. So therefore, it doesn't become muktzah. It doesn't become a base, and therefore it's allowed to do that. The only problem is if you got like from all sides, something which is not movable, and there's no way to get in there, you have no access. So then you got a problem, right? There's no way to get it out. All right. That's the story. I think there's one more here. Hey, also. So right now, the other side, the flip side of this halacha, right? The other side. The opposite, which is that tamam v'kisa b'davar shenital. But if he, as we said, right? We already said this, but now he's telling you. If he used, right, from the side and from the top, something which is muktzah, which it cannot be moved, so if it's some of it is revealed, as we said, right, notel machazir, right, he can take it out and put it back. There's no problem. The imla, but if it's not, right, and no notel, he cannot take it out from there. That he's stuck. Can you imagine? The food is in the box, which is in the pot, and you can't access it. Terrible, right? What can you do? Not a great scenario. Okay, fantastic. So I guess we'll move on. Go to Vav. So it says Bet Yosef here. Right? This rabbi says, Yom Tov shechal liot be'erev Shabbat. Oh, okay. So now we have a special situation, right? Which is Erev Shabbat is Yom Tov, right? It's like, one after the other. Hayam makpid Rabbi Yehuda ben Bar Natan shelo le'atmin be'avanim. So he says, if that happened, right, he says this rabbi was particular not to insulate with stones. Why is that? The Sfira le de Asur, he holds that it's forbidden, the Habe Kemo Binyan. So he holds, right, that if you put a bunch of stones, and pile them up, it's like you're making a building, right? So the truth is, we don't hold that way. You know why that is? Because since you're not, plastering, right, those stones, it's not really permanent, so that's not really called building. It's like you're making like a Lego house, It's not called building. Something temporary, unless you plaster it, or whatever. So this is the reason why, but let's see, right? There's another opinion here. Rabbi Yamin Omer, right? Exactly what I told you, right? This rabbi says, smart rabbi. He says, no, it's only permanent, right? If it's a problem if it's permanent, but if it's not permanent, there's no problem, right? So, but you don't plaster it, it's not really permanent, right? You're going to take it apart. So, only permanent building the rabbis forbade. He's right, of course. Like Rab Nachman said, right? This is where it comes from, this source, right? Avanim shel beit hakiseh mutar lesadran b'Shabbat. Oh, so it says, right? In those days, they didn't have toilets, right? So what they did is they piled up some stones, and sat on top of it. So you're allowed to do that on Shabbat, he says. Why? Because also same thing, right? It's not really permanent. It's temporary. Since you're not plastering it, it's not really a permanent building there. So therefore it's allowed. That's what he says. Because the rabbis didn't forbid a temporary building, right? They never decreed on that. The Gezerah Banan Arai Mishum Keva Mishum Kebadol Lo Gazur. So it says, the truth is, that the rabbis did make a decree, right? Not to do even something temporary, but here they didn't decree. Why? Because people need to use the bathroom. So it says also, same thing, Kvod Shabbat, right? The honor of Shabbat. They didn't decree on something like that. So therefore they didn't decree. So in other words, there is a decree sometimes, according to this opinion, right? But not when, not for the honor of Shabbat. So what's the honor of Shabbat? That you need this stone structure to insulate, right? And that's why we allow it. It's honor of Shabbat. Okay, great. So it says the Katav Rabbeinu Ishayam says this rabbi Shavanim Shaisha Mesadet Ben Kira. Oh, so he says, what about the stones that a woman, right, sets it up to make a stove, whatever, something like that. Shavanim Mutar Letaltanan B'Shabbat. He says you're allowed to carry those stones. They're not muktzah. That's what it seems in my eyes. He says as we say in this parak, right? B'meisha, Samechem Mudalev, Korefet ala even ve'ala egos, Livad shelo tifrof alechatchila b'Shabbat. Amar Abaye, Sefer atan lematbea, Piresh Rashi. Right, so Rashi explains, right? What does this Gemara mean? He says, Sefer atan lematbea delad batil tulhu. So he says, when it comes to coins, we cannot carry them. Aval even, but when it comes to stones, that's designated for this purpose, you're allowed to carry them. So you see from here that since he thought about it right before Shabbat, so it's considered to be designated. Therefore, you're allowed to carry it. Same thing when it comes to stones, right, which are used for insulation. Since it was designated for this purpose, you're allowed to carry them. That's the end of it. Okay. All right. What else we got? That's it. Done. Okay. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch. So this is also short. It says Yom Tov shechal yot be'erev Shabbat, right? As we said, Yom Tov falls on erev Shabbat, right? Which means it's Friday, right? יש מי שאוסר להטמין באבנים. So there is one that says, right, that you're not allowed to insulate with stones. משום דהווה כמו בניין. It's like building, right? ויש מתירים, and some allow this, right? So we paskin like the second opinion that it is allowed. There you go. Okay, very straightforward. Let's go to Het. I'm sorry, this is Zain. Yeah, okay, Zain. Let's see. We got time. We can do another one. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I think this is the end of the chapter. Oh, that's good. We're getting somewhere. We're getting there. All right, very good. Let's try this one. Right? It says in this book, Siman Samechei, right? Chapter 65. The Tanurim Shalanu, so it says, our ovens, right? Even though this rabbi was 600 years ago, he says, our ovens, right? That we, he says, we insulate the cholent in there, the Shabbat, for Shabbat. The Sotmin PM Bedaf, right? So he says, what we do is, we close it up, right, with some kind of a board. The shorkinotam betit, and then we plaster it, right? Oh, the listor ota stima b'Shabbat. So the question is, he says, are you allowed to open that up on Shabbat? You know, because it's like, you know, it's like demolition. Are you allowed to demolish this structure in order to remove your cholent? This is the question. So it says it should be allowed to do this, he says. So he says, you know what, you got to do shinui. A little bit shinui you got to do. That's one way to do it. Or tell a child to do it, right? Interesting. Goy, if you don't have a goy, right? Tell a child. So what do you see from there, right? Goy is better than a child. You know why that is? So the answer is because we're afraid the child is going to get habituated, you know, to this kind of thing. So we prefer to tell a goy. Because what happens is if he's going to get habituated, when he grows up, you know, he may think it's allowed to do. So we prefer to have it done by a goy, you know. Or, as we said, right, do a shinui. I was just looking at the poskim today, you know. There are several poskim who say that shinui is actually better than telling a goy. Some say it's equal to telling a goy. Some say it's even better. Why is that? So the reason is because when you do it with a shinui, it's like doesn't look like you're doing the labor at all. You know, you're doing it in an alternative manner, and so therefore it doesn't have the. So there's no might ein, there's no suspicion there. Hold on. Okay, whatever. So then he says, so it says, even if a big person would do it, you know, grown up, right? Grown up is going to do it. You know, even in the normal way, he says, it's not really forbidden, you know, to do this. Even our ovens, he says, that they're attached to the ground. Binyan. right? V'chen katav Mordechai, so Mordechai says this back by Chavit, De'afal gav de'amina, and he says, even though we say, chotmot shebekarka, that seals in the ground, matir, mafkia, velo chotech, seal in the ground, right? You're allowed to open it up and unravel it, but not to cut it. Hanemile said that only applies when b'shasui lekayim al menat shelo le'asiran b'Shabbat. When it's made to last and not to remove it on Shabbat. Aval daf enon asui lekayim. But he says when it comes to a board, it's not really made to stay that way. It's not permanent. It's made to open it. So therefore it's allowed. Look over there, it says the way I wrote. B'Shem Tumat Adeshin, the name of this rabbi. The Agur Katav v'Zel Shano. Agur says, "V'Shiv Mahari Mulan." This rabbi says Mahari. Tanur Satum, then right. Hamorechi Matir LeSotro. He also quotes this. That when you have a oven, right, which is like sealed like this, the Mordechai allows to open it up on Shabbat. So we don't forbid it because of demolition. Concern about demolition. And the Perek over there, the Sefer Aguda, also this book, Oser, he forbids, he says, right? This rabbi forbids. Mishum Destida, because it's demolition. So he says, I saw that one, right, allows to do by way of a goy or tinok, or by way of a child. When it's possible. He says, even if you don't have all this, right? They said, even by a Jew, I think I saw this also in Tosfot. So he says, what about closing it back up, right? After you opened it already. What about that? If you have, right, coals which are still burning there, right? Embers, whatever. Then it's going to be maybe, right, a short thing. But if you do this, but he says we do allow it. The custom is to allow it by way of a goy. The other day, Israel, so he says, what about by way of a Jew? If he doesn't seal it, the gamri altogether, maybe it's allowed. Look at the end of it. Okay, that's interesting. A lot of interesting ideas here. So it says, right, the Mordechai. So he says, whenever you have, right, lochashot, burning coals, saviv aktera, around the pot, en le'Israel litol, Jew should not move that, right, take it out from there. Usalek aktera, to remove the pot. Why? Shemechate umavir, because he's igniting the coals like that, stirring and igniting. The top coals, umechabeta atachtonot, and the lower ones, he's actually, right, he's extinguishing them. So it writes over there in his gloss, you have to be careful. Don't tell Goy to remove that. The it be maseh, because it's a, right, it has a deed, it has a, it's active. But he says you shouldn't forbid the dish if it was removed by a Goy. The mav'ir, that because it's igniting, because even by way of a Jew, right, it's a labor which is not needed for its body. That's what we call that, right? So therefore, it's only forbidden rabbinically. Aliba de Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Shimon, is all more so if it's known for sure. That for sure you don't have any, right, glowing coals there. When you remove it, then it's even mutar for a Jew, allowed to for a Jew. The salkat, remove it from there. Right? Only that it should have a place to grab the pot, or the right, lona set basis ladavar asur. And also the pot does not become a base for something forbidden. If he didn't have his intention to take them out, and then he changed his mind to take it out. So it says Bit Yosef, right? It seems like there's a scribe's error here. You have to change something. Elab kishelo haya bedato. You have to say like this, right? When he didn't have his intention, he come to take them. Ve'ate kisrat ba'ala tosfot tumot. So it comes out like the Tumah. Shkatab Rabbeinu v'siman kushin tet. The two wrote this in chapter 309. Okay, great. So let's look at the Shulchan Aruch. Maybe we have time to finish it. Let's see what we. So says Shulchan Aruch like this: Tanuch shemanichim bo achamim. If you have an oven, right, and you place in there your cholent, the sotmin pi badaf v'shokam, right, and then what do they do in those days, right? Today we don't have this again, right? They used to close it up, place a board and seal it up with plaster. Petit, right? Mutar listor ota stima. So you're allowed to open it, right, to get the food out of there. To remove the cholent. And then again, right, you can go back and close it again, seal it up. Why is this, by the way? Why don't we say this is called building, demolishing? Why don't we say that? Because it's only temporary. That's the whole thing, as we said right before. It's temporary. So for the honor of Shabbat, we allow it. As we said. So then says Shulchan Aruch, but what about if you have glowing coals over there, right? So then you should do it by way of a going. Do it by way of a going. We also said, right, you can do it with a shinui. That's also allowed. Let's see Mishnah Berurah. So Mishnah Berurah, right, says a Jew cannot do this, right, to close it up. Why? Because he's extinguishing the coals, right? So you got to do it by way of a goy. And also he says, right, as we saw in the Bet Yosef, that if you don't close it completely, right, you leave it a little bit open, then even a Jew can do it. Why? Because in a case like that, it won't extinguish the coals. Uh-huh. So he brings the Magen Avraham who says, right, that means you leave it like, open. You don't really close the door. Because if you do, it will extinguish. He's got a point. Okay, well, okay. So he brings here a lot of interesting things, different opinions, whatever. I'm not going to get into it now. But the point is, right, bottom line is that, first of all, the bottom line is we don't have this today. But maybe it comes to tell you something even for today, right? Which is that if you have an oven which is on, right, and you close it, maybe you're extinguishing. So you know what we'll do? We'll get into that tomorrow. I want to deal with this a little bit tomorrow. Bezat Hashem, because there's no time now to get into this. It requires a little bit thought. I would like to review this a little bit. So thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. And tomorrow, Bezat Hashem, we'll come back and look at this whole thing again. Right? We'll give it another look, just to make sure we got it right.
Okay, thank you.
God bless. Have a good night. Laila tov.
Laila tov.